Hi, everyone. Now, before we get started, I have to ask, what are you drinking today? I've got myself some coffee, but of course, depending on the day, it could be a glass of wine or a cocktail. But I'm having coffee and I want to show you this coffee that I am hooked on that it is here in Mexico, and I don't know if they sell it in the United States. I don't think they do, but basically it's Nescafe. But this particular flavor is called Cafe de Olla. And oh my gosh, the flavor of it has a cinnamon and natural sugar cane type flavor in it. It smells so good too. But anyway, it is my go to coffee. I have a cup almost every morning and I just really like it. And if I ever come back to the United States, you know, uh, I hope they sell it. If not, I will be bringing a couple jars with me. But anyway, I want to say just grab whatever you'd like to drink, okay? Get comfortable and come hang out with me for a little while. So today's story it's almost 30 years in the making, okay? If you're new here, of course, my name is Lisa and welcome to my channel, The LayDbug Experience. This is just a place where I want to share my life, the adventures, the mistakes, the lessons, the food, the travel, the laughs, and also sometimes I might share moments that were really hard for me and as I was just trying to get through them. So today's story is one that I've been wanting to talk about, and it's a story about how I ended up in Mexico. And believe me, had you asked 25-year-old Lisa where she'd end up years ago, I just know I would have told you Mexico was probably going to be like number 50 on the list. So let's talk about this. One thing I know is I think everyone has something that they've carried around for years. For some people, it might be writing a book. For somebody else, it might be opening a business. But for me, it was living in another country. And, you know, I know like in the last, for a while now, maybe the last 5 years, 10 years, it's becoming very popular. Lots of people are wanting to move out of the country, and experience life differently, you know. Now, I do kind of know kind of where, the desire came to live out of the country came from. I kind of know where that desire, but, a little bit is because, basically I didn't grow up really traveling outside the country. We would go visit, family in different states and stuff, road trips, things like that. But I didn't grow up in a house where we got to go on planes and fly and all of that, and just go traveling to different places. I didn't have that experience. And, so of course it made me very curious about the world as I got older, and because I just, I wanted to know what life would look like, somewhere else, whatever it was, it just never left me though. So I remember I was in culinary school. I went to culinary school in the late 90s. I was about 25, 26. And I remember I was in a French class, French cooking class. And then all of a sudden it just hit me. It's like, one day I'm gonna live in a different country. I'm gonna go live in Paris, France. It's like suddenly I got fascinated with France and French culture, French food, things like that. The language. I even tried to teach myself the language, over the years. But I was like, I'm gonna go live in a different country, not to visit, not to vacation, but I'm gonna actually go live in another country. Now, I didn't have a plan, of course, and at the time, I didn't have money to really just get up and go to a whole nother country. I didn't even have a passport. I didn't get my passport until literally in my 40s. I was early 40s. I was 41. 41 when I got my passport. Okay. Um, But I always had this feeling before then. It's like, I'm gonna move to another country. And the feeling just never left. And I trusted it. I just kept it just in the back of my mind, just randomly. And of course, throughout life, life was lifing, as you know, a young adult, didn't get into, in my 30s and things like that, going into the 40s, and we'll say like in late 20s, 30s, going into the 30s and all of that. Life just started life. And, I became a mom. And, I worked a couple of different jobs, but for the most part, I've been a teacher. I had been a teacher for a long time. I taught high school and I taught culinary arts, things like that. And of course, I had other jobs in between teaching jobs, so life was just, you know, it was busy at times. But still, every now and then, there was this thought in the back of my mind, and it would always show up like a little whisper, like, be like, hey, psst, psst, don't forget about me. And, I even remember telling my daughter at times when she was a little girl, I was like, oh, how would you feel if we moved to a different country? Would you like to move to a different country? I would just throw things out to her. We're going to move to China. We're going to move to Korea. And she would just go with it. Okay, yeah, I would love that. That would be fun. That would be cool. She just kind of went with it. And again, I believed it. I didn't know when it would happen. I didn't know how it would happen. I just believed that it would happen. So let's fast forward to 2017. It was when I first visited Mexico. Now, it was my second time leaving the country, though, was when I went to Mexico. No, was it the second time? Yes, it was my second time traveling outside of the country. And again, I was in my 40s and I had a friend and they said, well, let's go to, you want to go to Mexico? I said, Mexico? Oh, I've never been to Mexico. Yeah, let's go. And so it happened. We did the typical, tourist living, staying on a resort and doing the resort things, all of that. But of course, too, when I do travel, I like to go off the beaten path, no matter where I'm traveling to. I don't like to do the typical touristy things. And I was like, hey, we're gonna go off the resort, right? And he had already been to my friend had already been to Mexico several times. Like that was his place. So I said, sure. I mean, he said, sure, let's go off he showed me, we went off the resort. We went into the main city. Of course, it was still touristy, but it was that moment just walking around and seeing locals and hearing all the Spanish, just going on. And I was sold, I was sold. I started imagining myself instead of in Europe, which was surprising. I started imagining myself living in Mexico. And once I got home after that trip, I couldn't stop thinking about Mexico. I started thinking of ways, how can I get to Mexico? What am I going to do? How do I support myself? How can I was just thinking of all these things. Now, I had also thought about, and done research on getting a certification to teach English abroad, which is called a TEFL certification, TEFL, and that stands for teaching English foreign learners. Okay. And so that is a great way. A lot of people for many years have traveled outside the country in order to help support themselves. They'll go to a foreign country and they'll teach English because the jobs are so abundant. And so I had looked into research on where I could find a school. I did find a school in my state, in Colorado, actually not far from where I lived. And it was a school that provided English lessons for foreigners who, people who are living in the country and they want to better their English for, because they live here now and plus for work and things like that. So I found this school, but then I continued to do my search, and then I found a school that provided the TEFL certification. There are many all around the world. So I found a school in Mexico, in Guadalajara specifically. And so I decided, oh, okay, eventually that's the school I'm gonna go to. Because I've learned also that over time that it's best to get your certification specifically in the country that you would like to work in, because it would be easier to help, that you'll find jobs. It would be easier, so I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Guadalajara. Plus it actually was cheaper. It was literally like $1,000 cheaper than doing it in the US. And so I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. So now fast forward to 2019. I went to Guadalajara, Mexico. I did a 30-day rigorous program for my teaching certificate to teach English abroad, which most of those programs are all 30 days. You're literally, it's like a job for 30 days. You're in class from 8 a.m. to about 4 or 5 p.m. Monday through Friday and some Saturdays. And then you also get some in class, like real in class training, because then they work with some English schools that are within the city. And then you go there to do your in person training, teacher training, kind of like, think about it, like I've went to school in the United States and did, for, you have to do like on the job training for teaching while you're getting your bachelor's in education and stuff like that. So anyway, I got my certification. That was about September of 2019. And by November, I was getting, some emails, and I got a couple phone calls from schools in Mexico. And I happened to get a call from a school that I found more interest in out of, a few of the phone calls. And they were in the city of Zamora, Michoacan. Zamora, Michoacan is another city and state in Mexico. It's about 2.5 hours from Guadalajara. And so I spoke with the assistant principal. I ended up doing, you know, 2 or 3 interviews, and interviewing with her, then with administrator, even an interview with a parent or two. And so I ended up getting the job. So I was supposed to move there January of 2020, but of course I couldn't move there right at like January 2nd or whatever, because I had a lot of, loose ends I needed to tie up. And I didn't just pick up and just sell everything like some people. Oh, I sold everything in my home, and, and then I just moved out of the country. No, I didn't do that. My daughter was taking a gap year because she had just graduated high school that summer of 2019. So she was going to take the gap year, come with me to Mexico, whether we stay there 6 months to a year. And then she would be able to come back home, and, basically figure out, about herself going to college, or just, figure out what she wants to do with her life, of course. So I still had an apartment back home and all of that. So it wasn't just like, like I said, I didn't just sell everything and say, okay, we're in another country. That's not what I did. So anyway, by the time we did move in 2020, we moved to Zamora, Michoacan on March 1st of 2020. And my daughter and I, we were only in Mexico for, let's see, 10 days. All right, let me repeat that. We were in Mexico for 10 days. And guess what happened? What happened, Lisa? Oh, let me tell you. The world shut down. We hadn't even gotten our bearings yet. We didn't even know where the grocery stores were. You know what I'm saying? We were still familiarizing ourselves with the city of Zamora, Michoacan. Okay. And the pandemic happened. It came and it shut everything down. It was just so surreal. All of us, we pretty much now, if you're listening, then you were definitely here during the pandemic, and you know what you were doing during the pandemic. Whether maybe you got, you lost your job, or maybe you had to start working from home, or it was just a lot going on, or unfortunately maybe someone in your family got sick, and things like that. But it was surreal. It was just a terrible time in American history, or just in the history of the world in general, that the pandemic happened. So my daughter and I, we ended up staying for about 6, 7 months. We moved back about July, and it was so depressing. Like once I stepped foot back on American soil, I just was sad. I was depressed. The pandemic ruined my dream. The pandemic just took everything that I thought I worked hard to get to. Just took it away. Just pulled the rug from underneath me. Now I got to come back to this place. Back to United States. I was so sad. And so once I came back, I tried to you know see about finding a job somewhere else, things like that, but my mental health got affected so bad. Now, one thing too is about my mental health, which will come in some other videos, is that um, I've suffered from depression more than half my life, and I've had periods where it's very, very low periods. So during the pandemic, it was very, very low period. It goes even further than, further out. I mean, or after the pandemic, where my depression, I was really affected about the pandemic and coming home, and then it just kind of bled into other things, bled into the depression and made the depression worse, things like that. And so that's what was going on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop, and I am going to come back with a part two. Okay. Going to come back with a part two and discuss the other the other half of how I ended up in Mexico. All right. So I do have a question before I go. Okay. So my question is, have you ever had something you wanted so deeply that it stayed with you for years? And I'm not talking about something you wished for once and forgot about it, but something that kept, finding its way back to your heart until one day you just finally said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. All right, it's happening. So I'd really love to hear your story. So please, if you don't mind, share your stories in the comments. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please, I'd love for you to subscribe and come back for part two. Don't forget to click that bell so you can get that notification when I drop the next video. Until next time, remember, live life with no reservations. I'll see you all soon.